Good morning to you all. In Nepal, we say Jai Masih. That is a Christian greeting, which means long live Messiah. That means hail Messiah. So Jai Masih to you all. And warm greetings from the top of the wall, the Everest land, Nepal. My name is Suraj Kasula. I'm a minister of Shekinah Evangelical Church. Our church name was Bilan Church. Now we have named our church Shekinah Evangelical Church. And it is my great privilege to be with you in this online fellowship. Many thanks for your continuous prayers and support for me, for my ministry, and for my country, Nepal. I really appreciate for inviting me to speak here. I'm going to speak three things very shortly, probably 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm going to share you three things. First, as we know that we all need comforting words, so I'll share some comforting word from God very shortly. And I will tell something about my ministry in Nepal. And I will tell the present situation and upcoming future of Nepal. So three things. So let me share first some comforting word, some consolation from the word of God, because we all draw the comfort from the Lord. So we all know that the whole world has turned upside down by this global pandemic, COVID-19. The fear of death has enshrouded humanity. We are walking in the valley of the shadow of death. Many had died and many are counting their last breath. It is absolutely horrible to die without comfort and consolation and without seeing their loved ones and without proper funeral. I mourn over the life lost in Scotland and we pray for you and your country. But despite this horrible situation, Bible tells us that God is absolutely sovereign over each and everything. No circumstance or situation has ever gone or ever will go or ever go beyond his control. He is absolutely in control, and this should be my and your comfort. Everything is happening under his control and under his plan and under his guidance, and that should be our very comfort. I'm intrigued by what Christ said in the Gospels. Christ said that even your hair has been numbered. Every hair has been numbered. And not even a small sparrow would fall in the ground without the will of the Father. And notice hair and sparrow, who cares about them? They are very small things, not meaningful, not remarkable, very small. People just pass by. They don't care about hair and birds. But what Jesus is saying here is, I think, this. If God is sovereign over these very small, meaningless things, remember that how much more He is sovereign over our whole life. If He has absolute control over these small things, He is controlling our life. He is sovereign over everything. Because Christ said, we are more precious than the birds. He is not only sovereign in our good days, our better days, but He is also sovereign in our evil days like this pandemic. If God is not sovereign, I think our hope would fade. We have nothing to hope for because He knows future from the beginning. That is our hope, and nothing's happened or nothing could happen without His permission. And in these days, I'm really feeling that, and I am really comforted by this doctrine of sovereignty. We see His good hands in our evil days, such like this, because He is immovable rock. Bible says that. Immutable God, and the book of Hebrews says He is same today, yesterday, and forever. He will never change. We see God's sovereign plan in the dark days of Joseph and Job. Remember the life of Joseph and Job? They had horrible, darkest days of their life. But despite that, he was in control. And even God was governing in those bitter days. God brought wonderful things out of their evil and horrible days. Our God can bring good thing out of bad. We see same in the life of Jesus as Ian prayed, he suffered more horribly than Joseph and Job. Yet God brought great salvation out of that horrible and shameful cross. And that is why we are saved, and that is where we draw our salvation from the cross of Calvary. This shows that God sometimes put us into this horrible situation to bring good things out of bad in order to teach us more and refine us. And He deliberately put us there so that we may understand Him more, so that we may hold fast tightly. And that is the logic of Joseph's life, and that's the logic of Job's life, and that is, I think, probably the logic and the theology of Jesus going to Calvary. He held tight in those dark days because he had absolute hope in God. And Jesus went to the grave in that absolute hope that God would vindicate him, and he would, accept his sacrifice for his people. One of the intriguing verse for me is Ecclesiastes 7:14. It is really beautifully, it puts this, everything summarizes this, and it is wonderful and it is really comforting. It says like this, Ecclesiastes 7:14. When times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider this. God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, no one can discover anything about their future. So, brothers and sisters, we have to take suffering to strengthen our faith. Thomas Watson said, affliction promotes holiness. The more the diamond is cut, the more it sparkles. Another Puritan said, affliction is God's furnace where he melts his gold. Luther once said he could never rightly understand some of the Psalms until he was in affliction. So I exhort you, Church of Christ, take this suffering as the stone on which you sharpen your sword of faith so that we can battle with this pandemic and we can battle future pandemic. No, we don't know what is coming. So let us take this suffering as opportunity to sharpen our sword of faith. Let no fear engulf us, but faith may engulf our fear. Let us feed faith to starve our fear. Otherwise, fear will be faith, which will starve our faith. So whatsoever come to pass, let us know this, that in all things God works for good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. That is what Paul said in Romans 8:28. And we all know that we are called according to the purpose of God. God has given existence on a purpose. We didn't come here randomly. It was God's design. It was God's plan. And Bible says, Romans 8:28 says, there is a purpose and everything works good for those who are called. Notice in all things, that means he works good in our lives, not only in our good days, but in our suffering, disease, pandemic, and I have to say death itself, because we know many Christians have died, and that is also God working for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. So, God's goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, says King David. All the days, that means beyond the grave as well. In King David in Psalm 23. So we know we are eternally secure in the palms of God's hand. We are eternally secure in good hands of God. He is our good shepherd. He is the good shepherd. Charles Spurgeon said, this is one of my best, one of my, very consoling quote. He said, Charles Spurgeon said, I am persuaded that the doctrine of predestination and sovereignty is one of the softest pillows upon which the Christian can lay his head, and one of the strongest staffs upon which he may lean in his pilgrimage along this rough road. Notice rough road. I think we are all going through the rough road, and this is a pilgrimage. We are heading to the temple, the glorious temple in heaven. We are in the pilgrimage, and the doctrine of predestination and sovereignty is the softest pillow where we lay our head and the strongest staff upon which we may lean. But don't think me wrong, that doesn't mean that we rejoice in our suffering. We must do everything to alleviate suffering and pain. We must not seek suffering. However, it is not good to worry and fear without any hope. Bible never says that. Let us, we suffer but with hope. One research shows that in the world, most of the people are anxious and worry about their future, which will never come to pass. About like people are worrying about the future, which will never come to pass, and that is their big worry. So, dear friends, let us lay down our all burdens of anxiety, fear, and every, bad things at the feet of the cross, because the Lord provides and cares for us even in this walk of valley of the shadow of death. His gracious providence is available even in these horrible days, like the lives of Joseph and Job. So, his providence is available always because he called us according to his purpose. Let me tell you something which came out, good things because of this pandemic. We always tend to think there are all bad things going on. But I was reading, articles and newspaper, and they said this, something good, the earth, our earth's ozone layer is getting better because there is no air pollution across the globe. That is something good coming. There is some, good thing. And, one of my friend in Scotland, was telling me that 1/4, I don't know whether it is, 1/4 or not, but he said 1/4 of Britain's population is watching online church service who had never been to church before or who had left church ages ago. And this might be true across Europe and probably across the world because the fear of death has enshrouded and people are returning to the faith they had left ages ago or the faith of their forefathers. Now they need God, and I think God is speaking to the world, to bring something good out of bad, Who knows, And also he told me that often in Europe and America, spiritual revival, and great awakening broke out after the pandemic or world war. So who knows what God is planning after the pandemic in the world? Lazarus' death in John 11 is really intriguing to me. There you see Mary and Martha send message to Lazarus' sickness, right? And Jesus would not go. And he remained 2 more days where he was. And Martha and Mary wanted Jesus immediately, but Jesus won't go. And Jesus, what was Jesus doing there? Jesus was just staying there so that Lazarus would die. Jesus was letting Lazarus to die. Why? And the passage says to reveal God's glory. So we see in Martha and Mary's, the Lazarus' death, we see human wish versus divine will. We want everything to go smoothly. We want everything to change. We don't want to wait. Everything, Lord, do this, do that, we pray. Sometimes God works is different, His mind is different. Sometimes God waits a little bit longer to bring good things out of bad. And finally, we know because Jesus waited there and Lazarus died, Jesus went there and revealed the glory. And he said, I am the resurrection and the life. So he revealed his glory. So Jesus waited there for the betterment of him and his people. Also, a friend of mine told me a god of pleasure in the world, a god of mammon, god of money, a god of evil entertainments, all have been judged like God judged the god of Egypt. And also, there's another one things that I have to say, that Christian missionaries, you might have heard this, Christian missionaries who are imprisoned in Iran are released for some months, to maintain social distancing, because in the prison there were many people, and they thought that one would contract coronavirus would spread, so they were released, and among them were Christian missionaries. So something, there are good things coming out of bad. So we know that Lord is sovereign over everything and He works according to His plan. So now I'm going to tell a little bit about the work I'm doing in Nepal at the moment. As you know that I am pastoring a church in Bhaktapur, which is just 13 kilometers from Kathmandu, the capital city. And in this day we are doing online service like you are doing, and most of our church people can join, most of have internet access, which is very good. So our service is going on. And we started a Bible seminary, namely Bhaktapur Theological Seminary in 2018. Our seminary, Bible College, is affiliated with Miami International Theological Seminary, Florida, United States. So the student get degree from United States after they complete their study. And we have about 15 students in Bachelor of Theology. Last year we finished one batch, so this is second batch. Now they are in their second year, and I lecture there and work as an academic dean as well. And because of this lockdown, I am also doing lockdown Bible study series from John's Gospel. We are studying John's Gospel very carefully and very seriously and in depth, historical context and Greek, word studies, and the students really love it. And also people, church people, they join, and every morning we do 1 hour from that. And also I record that lecture and upload on YouTube so that other may can hear later on. Also, moreover, we are doing 10 minutes devotion on Westminster Shorter Catechism questions and answer every day. And this is unprecedented. No one has ever done before on Westminster Confession of Faith. Westminster Confession of Faith has been translated into Nepali, and we are doing 10-minute devotion every day. And people really like it because they have never heard those kinds of things before. And it is drawing wider audience across Nepal. People are saying, oh, you should do that every day. That's like very good stuff, because most of the people won't hear about Westminster, Confession of Faith, they don't know about that. So that's very summarized and well, written. So they think that's very good to learn. That's a great stuff, So we also have one church plan in eastern Nepal. Our church is providing food to street beggars 2 times a day. And these street people are the people who are hit by the lockdown because they would starve to death, because our government is not very good and there are no people that they can beg, so they would die otherwise, So our church is helping with food to them, and it's going on. And we have a mission school in Bhaktapur, namely Apex Boarding High School, and it is our church mercy ministry. We provide free education and daily food to poor, orphan, and needy students. So this is our mercy ministry. And we were also planning to start a theological seminary in Western Nepal in collaboration with Westminster Biblical Missions. There is no seminary in Western Nepal, not at all. No theological seminary, only training centers. So the American mission, Westminster Biblical Mission, they wanted to start a seminary, and they wanted to start in collaboration with Bhaktapur Theological Seminary. But we were working on, everything was going fine. Suddenly the lockdown disrupted. So hope we will catch on and we will establish after the lockdown. Let me now tell you some update about the present situation of Nepal. We are under lockdown since 2 months now. It is extended for another 2 weeks. And since 3 days, the lockdown become very strict, because in 3 days time, over 200 new cases have been added, sorry, our health system is not very good like in European countries. If the pandemic hit the country hard like in UK and US, I'm sure there will be a long-term chaos in Nepal, and that is very, troubling to government and to people. I think people will die more from starvation than from the pandemic, because our health system is poor and our government is corrupt, and it's chaos going on. Despite this, in the midst of this chaos, there are like parties fighting with each other in Nepal, and politics is chaos. In this period, they should work for the betterment of people, but they are fighting with each other. It's crazy. The food crisis is starting in developing countries like in Nepal and India, and the rainy season is at hand, and this is the rice planting, paddy planting is coming. But if the lockdown continues, I think there won't be paddy planting and there won't be harvesting, so it would be absolutely chaos, long-term chaos. Moreover, most of the NGOs and INGOs and missions and churches are run because of Western donation in Nepal. So all those INGOs, Red Cross, Scouts, and social organization, justice organization, they are all run because of Western donation, and it seems that this will stop or cut off, which will surely affect Christian missions and might shut down some. So there are lots of Christian missions which are run because of Western donation, and if the America and Europe is not getting better in finance, I think it's going to be affected in terms of mission as well. The aftermath of pandemic seems horrible. The remittance makes over 17% of Nepal's GDP. The remittance. Our government is run by remittance. Millions of people are working in the Middle East as laborers. In Middle Eastern countries, in Qatar, Dubai, in Malaysia, and such places like that, and they send money, and our government is run because of that GDP remittance. If they are sent back, it is a big fear that they all would come back to Nepal. They would be sent back from the government. So if they are sent back, there won't be remittance, and there will surely be unemployment problem, no jobs, which shall trigger food crisis and other horrible unsolvable problems. So it's just pessimistic future. It's just everything seems to be chaos, and there's a like political party and talk in media saying this is coming, so we should be ready, but our country is not ready. It's not, nothing can be done. Even the government, they were giving food for the poor and needy people, now they have stopped. So I don't know what's going on there. Another big problem, another big income of the country is tourism, and this is going to be affected too. So it seems chaos, pessimistic from human perspective, but I'm sure there, from divine perspective, it is optimistic. God might bring good out of bad, as I said. Who knows what He had casted the lot of providence in eternity past for the world and for Nepal. Let us intercede for one another before the throne of God. Christ is the only hope for Nepal and for the world. Lastly, I was preaching in these days from Psalm, in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And I came across this wonderful illustration about the shadow, the word shadow mentioned. And I would like to share this. I think you would like it. It's very interesting and it's really comforting. The shadow of the valley of death. I know the world, we all are walking in the valley of the shadow of death. But why the psalmist? Why King David called shadow and not reality? So I came across this example, which is very interesting. Once a preacher and his children were heading home in a car through a jungle road. The children were afraid of darkness and jungle and sought some comforting words from their father. But The father could not think anything in his head, and suddenly there was a big lorry that just passed nearby the car, nearly touched the car. And the lorry's big, horrible shadow hit the car. And there was a big noise that made to think everybody inside the car that the lorry itself hit them and they were dead. Sometimes it happens. You can't think when you hear a big sound, big noise, and they thought they were all dead, and they were horrified. Absolutely horror came in their faces. And the preacher said, "Children, don't worry. It was just a shadow, not the reality. Not the lorry hit us. It was just a shadow that passed by, that touched our car." He then thought something wonderful in his head, and he said that to children, which the children never forgot in their lifetime. He said this, "Children, do you know what happened 2000 years ago? There was a man named Jesus who was hit by the real lorry to death so that there would only remain shadow for his followers." Wow. In other words, it was Jesus on the cross who battled with the real suffering, real death, and real hell. If he had not battled there, we had to face and battle with reality. Because he had battled with reality, there remained only the shadow for believers because we can't stand before the reality. We can't battle with the devil. We can't battle with sin. We can't battle with death. Jesus did it, and because he battled with reality, he only gave a shadow. And this is what the walking in the valley of shadow of death means in Psalm 23. It was not reality. If it was reality, we would all die. We would be lost forever in eternity. But Jesus overcame it and only remained shadow for us. This means, the practical aspect of this example means this. Our suffering, our pain, agony, torment, which we are suffering nowadays, not only physical, psychological, mental, all sort of things. And fortunately, death itself is just a shadow of the reality which Jesus has already defeated. So even we have to go to death, to grave because of this pandemic, that will only be the shadow because reality was overcome 2000 years ago. In reality, Jesus was hit by the lorry. As a result, we only got its shadow. So I will leave you there with this example. Thank you very much for listening and thank you for giving this opportunity. Amen.